I woke up to the sterile bite of antiseptic and a burning incision. Before the anesthesia fully cleared, my husband dropped a thick yellow envelope onto my hospital tray. He leaned in, whispering for me to sign the divorce papers while the painkillers were still peaking. I realized he had timed this perfectly. He waited exactly 10 hours until his mother had my kidney securely inside her body before he decided to cut me out of his life. My name is Mara Whitfield, and I am 33 years old. I had just spent the last 6 months of my life acting as a human pincushion, enduring endless blood draws, psychological evaluations, and signing stacks of liability waivers thick enough to be a novel. I did it all to qualify as a perfect biological match for my mother-in-law, Evelyn Holloway. The surgery was finally over. I blinked my eyes open, struggling to adjust to the harsh, sterile white glare of the recovery room. The air tasted metallic, heavy with the scent of industrial disinfectant and stale coffee. Beside my bed, a heart monitor chirped a steady, rhythmic confirmation that I was still alive, despite the hollow, throbbing ache in my abdomen. I was in significant pain, but a wave of profound relief washed over me. I had done it. I had saved a family. The automatic door whooshed open and Grant Holloway walked in. He was 35 years old, dressed in a crisp, bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. He looked immaculate, not a hair out of place. A stark contrast to the chaos of the hospital. A nurse bustled in behind him to check my IV drip. Grant immediately reached out and clasped my hand. He squeezed it gently while the nurse watched, playing the role of the terrified, grateful husband to absolute perfection. But the moment the nurse turned her back to adjust the monitor, his grip changed. It tightened aggressively. It was not a hold of comfort or love. It was a restraint. His fingers dug into my palm with a pressure just shy of painful. "You did good, Mara," he said, his voice smooth but devoid of any real warmth. He waited until the nurse left the room before dropping the act entirely. The concern evaporated from his eyes, replaced by a cold, calculative stare. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a thick yellow envelope. He placed it on the rolling tray table, right next to my cup of melting ice chips. The header was unmistakable even through my drug-induced haze. Separation agreement. I stared at the bold black letters, my mind sluggish, trying to comprehend why my husband was serving me legal papers while I was still bleeding into a drainage tube. "Sign this before discharge," Grant said. He leaned in close, his cologne overwhelming the smell of antiseptic. "Let's make it quick and painless." I tried to sit up, but the incision screamed in protest, forcing me back against the pillows. Just then, his phone lit up on the mattress where he had tossed it. A notification banner slid across the screen. The sender was Tessa Lane. The preview text was short, brutal, and impossible to misunderstand dinner after your charity hero act. The white heart emoji felt like a physical punch to the gut. It was not an impulsive decision. He had planned this down to the minute. He had waited exactly 10 hours until his mother had my kidney securely inside her body before he decided to cut me out of his life. He waited until I was physically broken and medically vulnerable to discard me. He saw my eyes fixated on the screen and casually slid the phone into his pocket without a hint of shame. "Don't make a scene, Mara," he said softly, his tone dropping to a menacing whisper. "If you start crying or screaming, the doctors will note it as post-operative psychological instability. We don't want your noble sacrifice to turn into a messy mental health scandal, do we?" He looked at me with a predatory calmness. He expected me to shatter. He expected the tears, the confusion, the pathetic begging that he had conditioned me for over the years. I looked at the envelope, then up at his flawless face. The shock that should have paralyzed me instead calcified into something cold and hard in my chest. I swallowed the dryness in my throat and forced my muscles to relax. "Okay," I said. My voice was flat, raspy, and betraying nothing. Grant blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. He looked almost disappointed that I had not given him a show. Good. I knew you would be reasonable. I have to take this call. He turned on his heel and walked out without looking back. Through the glass partition of my room, I watched him stride down the corridor, answering his phone with a relaxed smile. My gaze drifted past him to the other side of the hallway. The blinds to the intensive care unit were partially open. I could see Evelyn lying there, unconscious, tubes snaking out of her arms. But then I saw a detail that Grant had missed. On her wrist, clamped right next to her standard hospital ID band, was a bright orange tag with a laminated card attached to it. It was a legal hold marker. My mind sharpened instantly, cutting through the fog of anesthesia. Why would Evelyn have a legal hold placed on her person immediately after surgery? Grant thought he had timed this perfectly. He thought I was finished, a used asset to be liquidated. I stared at the orange tag through the glass. If he wanted to end our marriage today, then I would be the one to write the final chapter. Lying there in the silence left by my husband, I let the memories wash over me. They felt different now, tainted by the yellow envelope sitting on the tray. Hindsight is a cruel lens. It takes moments that felt like love and exposes them as simple manipulation. Grant had always been obsessed with the optics of perfection. Our house looked less like a home and more like a spread in an architectural digest. Every surface was minimalist, white, and cold. If a throw pillow was out of place, he would fix it before he even took off his shoes. His social media was a curated gallery of success, the perfect steak dinner, the view from the executive lounge, the dutiful son holding his mother's hand. But it was all performance art. I should have seen it sooner. My entire career at Northgate Compliance and Forensics was built on spotting what people tried to hide. I spent my days hunting for financial irregularities, analyzing balance sheets for the bleed that companies tried to bury under gloss and corporate jargon. I found the ugly truths in the numbers. Grant, however, lived for the lie. He was addicted to the feeling of power, even if it was just the power to control the lighting in a room. I thought about Evelyn. For the first 5 years of my marriage, she had treated me with polite indifference, a woman who believed no one was quite good enough for her golden boy. But then the sickness took hold, and something shifted. 3 days before the surgery, she had asked to see me alone. She looked small in the hospital bed, her skin gray and papery. "Mara," she had whispered, gripping my hand with surprising strength. I was blind. Ambition blinds you. I'm sorry. At the time, I thought she was apologizing for her past coldness. Now, staring at the ceiling, I realized she was apologizing for what was about to happen. The surgery itself had been a strange battleground. Publicly, Grant had played the tortured soul, telling our friends he could not bear the thought of me undergoing such a risky procedure. He soaked up the sympathy, but in private he was a project manager. He pushed for the earliest surgical dates. He hounded me to sign the consent forms. He drove me to every single compatibility test, tapping his foot impatiently if the phlebotomist took too long. He acted like he was on a deadline. It felt less like he was worried about his mother's health and more like he needed the transaction to clear by a specific fiscal quarter. The warning signs were neon bright, and I had missed them. 3 weeks ago, he had slid a document across the kitchen island while I was making coffee. "It's just a post-nuptial agreement," he had said casually, buttering a piece of toast. "With Mom's health declining, the estate gets complicated. This protects the Holloway family assets. It protects you, too." "Mara," I had refused to sign it. I remembered the flash of genuine anger in his eyes, a micro-expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a condescending smile. After that, he became helpful. Too helpful. He insisted on taking over the mail and the bills. "You need to focus on getting healthy for Mom," he had said. "Let me handle the stress." I thought it was an act of service. Now I knew it was an information embargo. He was cutting off my lines of communication so I would not see the credit card statements or the bank alerts. My mind drifted to a moment just hours before I was wheeled into the operating room. I had been groggy from the pre-op sedative, drifting in and out of sleep. I heard voices in the corridor just outside my door. It was Grant, speaking in a low, urgent tone. "She is under now." "No, don't worry. After she wakes up, she'll sign. And then Mara has no more value." At the time, my drugged brain had dismissed it as a dream or a hallucination, but looking at the separation agreement next to me, the words crystallized into a terrifying reality. My kidney was not just an organ to save a life, it was a key. Grant needed the transplant to happen for reasons that had nothing to do with love. He was waiting for the surgery to be irreversible before he made his move. I heard footsteps approaching. Grant was coming back. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing. If he thought I was sharp, he would force the pen into my hand. If he thought I was broken and exhausted, he might get sloppy. I decided right then to play the role he had written for me. I would be the tired, confused, emotional wife. I just needed to buy time. I needed to understand what exactly I had unlocked by saving his mother. It was 2 a.m. when I finally opened my laptop. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional throb of pain from my healing incision. Grant was not home. He had texted me earlier to say he was stuck in a late strategy meeting, a euphemism I now understood meant he was likely with Tessa. I sat at the kitchen island, the cold quartz pressing against my forearms, and logged into our joint bank account. I was not looking for groceries or utility bills. I was looking for the bleed. At my job, I taught junior analysts that fraud is rarely a single explosion. It is usually a slow leak. I set the filter for the last 9 months and started scrolling. It did not take long for the pattern to emerge. It was clumsy, arrogant, and textbook. I found a withdrawal for $9,800. 2 weeks later, another for $9,600. Then, a third for $9,900. "You idiot," I whispered to the empty room. Grant was structuring. He was keeping the cash withdrawals just under the $10,000 threshold to avoid triggering a currency transaction report to the federal government. It was the kind of amateur mistake that people make when they think they are smarter than the system. I exported the data to a spreadsheet and cross-referenced the dates. I found a credit card charge for the Lakeside Grand Hotel in Seattle for a weekend in mid-October. That was the week Grant told me he was at a tech innovation summit in Austin. I pulled up my phone and navigated to Tessa Lane's social media profile. It took me 3 minutes to scroll back to October. There it was, a photo of her holding a champagne glass on a balcony, the Space Needle visible in the background. The caption read, "Weekend getaway with my favorite person." The date matched the hotel charge perfectly. I went deeper. I tried to access our high-yield savings account, the one we had been contributing to for a down payment on a vacation home. The login failed. I clicked on the profile settings and felt a chill run down my spine. The contact email for security alerts had been changed. It was no longer my email address. It was a generic Gmail account that I did not recognize. He had locked me out of the notifications so I wouldn't see the drain. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. I immediately initiated a password reset using my phone number, which he had surprisingly neglected to remove. Once I was in, I changed the password to a 64-character string of nonsense, enabled 2-factor authentication to my secret burner phone, and downloaded every single monthly statement. I uploaded the files to an encrypted cloud drive that Grant did not know existed. Then I saw it. A recurring monthly transfer of $4,500 going to an entity called Holloway Growth Partners. I searched the state business registry. It was an LLC formed 6 months ago. The registered agent was a generic legal service, but the address was a P.O. box in a town 2 hours away. It had all the hallmarks of a shell company designed to siphon marital assets. I switched tabs to the hospital's patient portal. I needed to check my discharge summary, but my eyes caught a notification in the legal section. Insurance beneficiary update completed. The timestamp was 3 days after my surgery. I froze. I did not remember updating my life insurance beneficiary. I clicked the document. There was a digital signature that looked like mine, authorized via a mobile device. I didn't sign this, I stammered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Grant had brought me the iPad while I was on a morphine drip. He probably told me it was a release form for a visitor or a meal selection. He had used my medicated state to legally remove himself as a liability and likely position himself to collect if the recovery went wrong. It was a legalized attack, weaponizing my own healing process against me. I heard the garage door opener rumble to life. He was home. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it into my tote bag. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to slump over the counter, burying my face in my arms. I needed him to think he was still the one in control. I pulled out my phone and typed a text to him, even though he was just 20 feet away. I can't read the papers tonight, I typed, making sure to sound pathetic. I'm so tired. Grant, the pain is bad. I hit send just as the door from the garage opened. I needed him to believe I was weak. If he thought I was defeated, he would get careless. And right now, carelessness was the only leverage I had. The vibration of my phone against the coffee table startled me. The screen displayed an unknown number with a local area code. I usually ignored these, assuming they were telemarketers or debt collectors calling about bills Grant had hidden from me. But something made me answer. "This is Mara," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Mrs. Whitfield, my name is Nora Kessler." A woman's voice replied. It was rasping and authoritative, the kind of voice that smoked unfiltered cigarettes and won arguments. "I am calling from the law offices of Leland Park." "I represent Evelyn Holloway." I sat up straighter, wincing as my stitches pulled. "Evelyn, is she okay? Did something happen at the hospital?" "Evelyn is stable," Nora said. "But she left a standing instruction with my firm. She stipulated that if your husband, Grant, attempted to initiate separation or divorce proceedings within 120 days of her transplant surgery, I was to contact you immediately. I understand papers were served." "Yes," I breathed out. "Yesterday. Then we need to meet. Come to my office. Come alone." An hour later, I stood in front of a brownstone that looked like it had not been renovated since the Cold War. Inside, Nora Kessler's office was a sanctuary of old-world law. It smelled of dust, lemon polish, and decaying paper. It felt like walking into an ethical vault, a stark contrast to the glass and steel facades Grant worshipped. Nora was a small woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind thick glasses. She did not waste time with pleasantries. She slid a heavy manila envelope across her mahogany desk. "Grant thinks he is clever," Nora said, her fingers resting on the file. "But his mother knew him better." "Open it." Inside, I found 3 things: a handwritten letter on personalized stationery, a thick legal document titled Trust Amendment, and a photocopy of a hospital social worker's note tagged with the subject line "Concerns regarding patient coercion." I picked up the letter first. It was dated 2 weeks before the surgery. "Mara," it began, the handwriting shaky but legible. "If you are reading this, then my fears were justified. I apologize for using you. I suspected Grant has been burning through capital and leveraging assets behind my back. He is desperate. I needed to live long enough to fix the estate plan and stop him from destroying everything your father-in-law built. You were the only one who could buy me that time." I looked up at Nora, my hands trembling slightly. She knew. She knew he would do this. "Read the amendment," Nora commanded. I turned to the legal document. Nora pointed to a highlighted section labeled the Donor Protection Clause. "It is a fail-safe," Nora explained. "Evelyn restructured the family trust. If Grant Holloway files for divorce or legal separation within the recovery window of the organ donor, he is immediately categorized as a hostile beneficiary. He is stripped of his inheritance rights. Furthermore, Control of the primary assets transfers to the donor, that is you. Mara under my supervision as the trustee. I stared at the words, the legalese swimming before my eyes. Grant had served me divorce papers to cut me loose, thinking he would inherit his mother's empire once she passed. But by trying to discard me, he had inadvertently handed me the keys to the kingdom. He doesn't know about this, I asked. No, Nora said. And he must not know until the trap is fully sprung. But listen to me carefully, Mara. You must protect yourself financially starting right now. Do not mix a single cent of your own money with his. Do not deposit any checks into joint accounts. If you do, he can claim it is marital property. She handed me one last sheet of paper. It was a list of documents Evelyn had secretly photographed and emailed to Nora over the last few months. These are invoices and contracts Evelyn found in his home office when she visited. Nora said, "Look at the third item. There is a loan for $120,000 taken out in Evelyn's name. She never signed for it." I looked at the list. The numbers were precise, damning, and terrifying. He forged her signature. I asked, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "We suspect so," Nora said. "But we need proof. Evelyn is not just a patient. Mara. She is a woman who realized she raised a shark. She didn't just get a kidney from you. She deputized you." I sat back in the leather chair, the weight of the envelope heavy in my lap. Evelyn had not just been saved. She had planted a landmine for her own son, and I was the one standing on the trigger. "I understand," I said, my voice hardening. "I won't let him get away with it." "Good," Nora said, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking sign on her wall. "Because from this moment on, you are not just a victim of a bad marriage. You are the gatekeeper of the Holloway fortune." The very next morning, I drove 3 towns over to a branch of Sovereign Republic Bank, a regional institution that did not have an automated data-sharing agreement with the national chain Grant used. I sat in a small, quiet cubicle and opened a checking account solely in my name. I redirected my entire paycheck from Northgate Compliance to this new account. I transferred the small inheritance my grandmother had left me, which had been sitting in a dormant savings account Grant had fortunately ignored. I was scrubbing my financial fingerprints from our shared life. I felt like a ghost haunting my own history, preparing to vanish before the exorcism. Grant was beginning to panic. I could feel it in the frequency of his contact. He called me 5 times before noon. He texted me incessantly, his messages oscillating between faux concern and aggressive demands. "Have you signed it yet? I can come home early to pick it up. I just want to file it so you can stop worrying." He was trying to frame the divorce as an act of administrative mercy, as if he were doing me a favor by discarding me. When he came home that evening, I lay on the couch, surrounded by empty pill bottles I had staged. I kept the lights dim. I can't focus on the papers right now. "Grant," I murmured, pressing a hand to my forehead. "The pain it's blinding today. My brain feels like cotton." "You are dragging this out." "Mara," he said, pacing the living room floor. "Maybe you should just resign from Northgate." "You need to recover. I will talk to HR for you, and I'm going to have our mail forwarded to my private box. You shouldn't be stressing over bills while you are healing." He was trying to isolate me. He wanted to cut off my income and my information supply. He wanted me blind and dependent. I reached into the pocket of my sweatpants and silently tapped the record button on my phone. "I don't want to quit my job," I said softly. Grant stopped pacing. He leaned over the back of the couch, his face twisting into a sneer that the world never got to see. "You think you have leverage because you gave a kidney. You don't. If you try to fight this, I will ruin you. No one believes a woman who just donated an organ would turn around and try to slash her husband's reputation." I held my breath, letting the silence stretch so the microphone would catch the heavy, threatening timbre of his voice. He had just handed me a weapon. Once he stormed off to take a shower. I opened my laptop again. I pulled up the electronic toll collection records for his car. He had been careless. The transponder pings created a clear map of his movements. Tuesday at 8 in the evening, exit 42. Wednesday at 7 in the evening, exit 42. I cross-referenced it with the geotags on Tessa's Instagram stories. Her apartment complex was right off exit 42. He wasn't working late. He was commuting to his other life. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. I hacked into his digital calendar, the one he thought was synced only to his work server. I found an appointment set for Friday at 2 in the afternoon. The entry read, Mobile Notary and Private Wealth Consult. Friday was the day Evelyn was scheduled to be discharged. Grant wasn't planning to bring his mother home to care for her. He was bringing a banker and a notary to her house the moment she walked through the door. He intended to force a signature on a power of attorney or a loan document while she was still weak and disoriented from the transition. He was not just cheating on me, he was actively conspiring to defraud a recovering patient. I pulled out my burner phone and sent a text to Nora. He is accelerating. He has a banker meeting Evelyn on discharge day. The reply came back 30 seconds later. So do we. I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I lifted my shirt and looked at the angry red incision running across my abdomen. It was ugly. It was jagged. It was a permanent mark of what I had lost. Grant thought this scar made me weak. He thought it was a symbol of my submission. I traced the line with my fingertip. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was evidence. If he wanted a war, I would walk into that courtroom and show the judge exactly what a wife looks like after she has been carved open and betrayed. The mail arrived while Grant was at work, a rare slip in his new blockade protocol. Among the junk flyers was a stark, red-lettered envelope addressed to Evelyn, but forwarded to our address because of a change of address request I had not authorized. I opened it. It was a notice of default on a home equity line of credit. The principal amount was $120,000, secured against Evelyn's lake house. The letter stated that payments were 3 months behind. Evelyn had never mentioned a loan. She owned that house outright. I called Nora immediately. An hour later, we walked into the branch of the lending bank. Nora slammed her power of attorney document onto the branch manager's desk with the force of a gavel. "We need to see the loan origination documents," Nora said, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Now." The manager, a nervous man with sweat beading on his upper lip, retrieved the file. I put on my reading glasses, shifting from wife mode to forensic analyst mode. I skipped the boilerplate text and went straight to the signature page. There it was, Evelyn Holloway. At first glance, it looked perfect. The slant was correct. The loop of the Y was characteristic. But then I looked closer. "It is a tracing," I said, pointing to the ink density. "Look at the start and stop points. The pen pressure is completely uniform. There is no variation in speed. When people sign their names, they use muscle memory. They go fast on the curves and slow on the turns. This was drawn, not written." A teller who had been hovering near the cubicle stepped forward. She looked young and terrified. "I remember that day," she said quietly. "Mr. Holloway brought his mother in. She was in a wheelchair. She looked barely conscious. He said she was on heavy medication for the pain. He put the pen in her hand and guided it. He said he was just helping her steady her grip." Nora turned to the manager. "What was the date of this signing?" "October 14th. The manager read from the stamp. I pulled up Evelyn's medical file on my phone, which I had saved during the transplant process. On October 14th, Evelyn was in the intensive care unit being treated for acute renal failure. She was intubated. She was physically incapable of being in this bank, let alone signing a loan document. The manager went pale. "Mrs. Whitfield, if this is true, we are not done." I cut him off. "Where did the funds go? They were not used to pay off the house." We forced the manager to trace the disbursement. The money had not gone into Evelyn's primary checking account. It had been wired to a temporary holding account at a different bank, and then immediately transferred to a limited liability company. "Who is the beneficiary?" I asked. The manager turned the screen so we could see. Holloway Growth Partners. The same shell company I had found on Grant's bank statement, the same company receiving the $4,500 monthly transfers from our joint savings. The circle was closed. Grant had not just taken out a fraudulent loan, he was laundering the stolen money through a shell company to hide it from both his mother and me. He was stripping the copper wiring out of his mother's estate before she even died. I looked at Nora. He isn't just cheating, he is embezzling. He forged a loan against a dying woman's asset, funneled the cash to himself, and is now trying to divorce me so he can secure the rest of the estate before anyone notices the hole in the accounts. "We have enough for a criminal referral," Nora said, her eyes gleaming. "The timeline proves impossible physical presence. The signature is a forgery. The beneficiary is a conflict of interest." "No," I said. I stood up, feeling a cold, dangerous calm settle over me. "Not yet. If we go to the police now, he will claim it was a mistake, or that he had verbal permission, or that his mother is confused. He will manipulate the narrative. I need him to admit it. I need him to say the words." "That is dangerous." "Mara," Nora warned. "I know," I said. "I need to get him to confess to the forgery without him realizing I hold the cards. I need him to think he is buying my silence." I walked out of the bank into the bright afternoon sun. I checked my reflection in the window. I looked tired, pale, and fragile. Perfect. I would play the victim one last time. I would let him think he was winning right up until the moment the trap snapped shut. I sent the text to Grant at exactly 10 in the morning. "I want to sign. I just want this to be over. Meet me at the coffee shop near the hospital." I chose the location carefully. It was a chain cafe with floor-to-ceiling windows and, more importantly, high-definition security cameras covering every table. I dressed for the role of the defeated wife. I pulled on an old, oversized gray sweater that swallowed my frame and left my hair unwashed and messy. I looked like a woman who had given up. Before I left the car, I opened the voice recording app on my phone, set the microphone sensitivity to high, and dropped it into the open breast pocket of my tote bag. I watched the waveform dance as I breathed. It was ready. Grant arrived 5 minutes late. He walked in with that confident, long-legged stride of a man who believes he controls the room. He ordered a black coffee and sat down opposite me, placing his briefcase on the table like a barrier between us. He scanned my face, taking in my pale skin and the dark circles under my eyes. He seemed pleased by my deterioration. "You look tired, Mara," he said, sliding the separation agreement toward me. "Sign this, and you will feel a weight lift off your shoulders. I am doing this so you can heal. I still worry about your future." "I really do." I stared at the paper, letting my hand tremble slightly as I reached for a pen. I stopped halfway, looking up at him with wide, confused eyes. "Grant, before I sign," I whispered, keeping my voice shaky. "I saw a letter at the house about a loan for $120,000 against the lake house. I didn't know Evelyn needed money." Grant stiffened. His eyes darted to the left, a tell he had never been able to hide. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. That is just estate management, Mara. Mom needed liquidity for the medical bills. You don't need to worry about complex finances. That is why I am here." "But," I paused, biting my lip. "The letter said she signed it on the 14th. Wasn't she really sick that day? I remember she couldn't even hold a spoon." I had touched his ego. Grant prided himself on being the fixer, the capable son who managed the difficult tasks. He couldn't resist taking credit for his heroism. "She was weak," Grant said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "I had to make sure the funds were secured. If I hadn't acted, we would have lost the house. I had to. Almost hold her hand to get it done. It was necessary. Without my help." That signature never would have happened. He had said it. He had admitted to physically manipulating her hand. I felt the phone in my bag vibrating with the weight of his confession. Suddenly, his phone lit up on the table between us. It was a call from Tessa Lane. The contact photo was a selfie of her in a bikini, pouting at the camera. Grant scrambled to silence it, flipping the phone face down, but the damage was done. I looked at him, my expression hardening just a fraction. Is Tessa? A business partner. Grant's face turned a mottled shade of red. He slammed his hand down on the table, rattling the coffee cups. Stop it, he hissed, his veneer of politeness cracking. Don't play games with me, Mara. You are trying to make this difficult. Just sign the damn papers. Look, I will give you cash. I will give you $30,000 right now. Call it a settlement. Call it compensation for your trouble. Just sign and disappear. He was trying to buy my silence. He was bribing a witness. I sat back in my chair. The trembling in my hands stopped completely. I looked him dead in the eye, dropping the act of the fragile victim. Grant, I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. On October 14th, your mother was intubated in the intensive care unit. She was unconscious. She couldn't hold a pen, and you just admitted you forced her hand. Grant froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and sickly. The hospital has cameras in the ICU hallways. I continued, standing up slowly. And this cafe has cameras too. You just tried to bribe me. Mara. Wait, he stammered, reaching for my arm. Don't touch me, I said. I picked up my bag, ensuring the phone was still recording, and walked out. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes on me, burning with the terrified realization that the mouse had just snapped the trap on the cat. I drove straight from the coffee shop to the office of Diane Mercer, a divorce attorney known locally as the Scalpel. She was not interested in mediation or gentle uncoupling. She specialized in scorched earth litigation. I handed her the recording of Grant attempting to bribe me, the photos of the forged loan documents, and the evidence of his affair. We are not just filing for divorce, Diane said, her pen scratching violently across a yellow legal pad. We are filing for a dissolution based on adultery and constructive fraud, and I am filing an ex parte motion to freeze all marital assets immediately. By the time he realizes what is happening, he won't be able to buy a pack of gum. At the exact same moment, Nora executed the second pincer of our attack. She sent a formal notice to Grant via courier and email, informing him that the donor protection clause of the Holloway Trust had been activated because he had initiated a separation within the 120-day recovery window. He was now classified as a hostile party. He was stripped of all executive power regarding his mother's estate. I did not stop there. I compiled the digital dossier, the tracing analysis of the signature, the ICU visitor logs showing Evelyn was sedated when she supposedly signed the loan, and the flow of funds to the shell company. I sent it all to the fraud department of the bank and the State Financial Regulatory Board. I hit send and felt a grim satisfaction. I was not just divorcing him, I was dismantling him. The fallout was instant. According to the tracking on our joint account, Grant tried to buy a latte at a bistro near his office an hour later. The transaction was declined. He tried again. Declined. I could picture the scene perfectly. He would have been standing there in his expensive suit, the barista staring at him, the line of customers behind him shifting impatiently. For a man like Grant, who treated his credit score like a religion, the public humiliation of insufficient funds was worse than a physical blow. He panicked. Instead of going back to work, he rushed to the hospital. Nora called me to report that Grant had tried to storm into the recovery ward with a new power of attorney document in his hand, intending to bully his mother into overriding the trust. But Nora had been faster. She had placed a legal blockade on Evelyn's room. Security stopped him at the nurse's station, informing him that he was on a restricted visitor list due to a pending investigation into elder financial abuse. That was the breaking point. When the money stopped flowing, So did the affection from Tessa. I saw on social media that she had deleted the photo of them at the lake house. She vanished the moment his credit card stopped working. My phone began to ring. It was Grant. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. Finally, I picked up, saying nothing. "Mara, please." His voice was unrecognizable. It was high-pitched and trembling, stripped of all its usual arrogance. "My cards, they aren't working. I can't even pay for parking. We need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. I love you. You know I love you." "Goodbye, Grant," I said, and hung up. He did not take the silence well. An hour later, my phone blew up with notifications. Grant had posted a long, rambling statement on his Facebook and LinkedIn profiles. He claimed he was heartbroken and asked for privacy as he navigated a difficult time with his wife. He wrote that the transplant surgery had triggered severe post-operative psychosis in me and that I was suffering from paranoia and delusions. He was trying to paint me as the crazy, ungrateful wife to protect his own reputation. I did not comment. I did not delete it. I simply took a screenshot and forwarded it to Diane. He had just handed us perfect evidence of defamation and gaslighting to add to the pile. I drove back to the hospital that evening. The guard at the door nodded to me and let me pass. I walked into Evelyn's room. She was sitting up, looking stronger than she had in months. Her color was returning. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes clear and sharp, stripping away the layers of pretense we had both lived with for so long. "He tried to get in," Evelyn said, her voice raspy but firm. "The nurses told me." "I know," I said, taking a seat beside her bed. I stopped him. Evelyn reached out and took my hand. Her grip was warm. She looked at the scar hidden beneath my shirt, then up at my eyes. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to reveal the steel beneath the gratitude. "Now, let me save you." The preliminary hearing was a masterclass in gaslighting. The courtroom was cold, smelling of floor wax and old wood, a fitting backdrop for the hell of paperwork we were about to wade through. Grant sat at the defense table, looking somber and aggrieved, while his lawyer, a man with a smile like a shark, stood up to address the judge. "Your Honor, we are requesting a continuance and a court-ordered psychological evaluation for Mrs. Whitfield," the lawyer said, gesturing dismissively toward me. "My client is deeply concerned. We believe the stress of the transplant has caused a severe break from reality. Her claims of fraud are simply the paranoid delusions of a woman who is unwell." Grant nodded solemnly, playing the part of the concerned husband to perfection. I felt a flash of anger, but Diane Mercer placed a calming hand on my arm. She stood up, her movements precise and lethal. "Your Honor, if we are discussing reality, let us listen to Mr. Holloway describe his own version of it," Diane said. She submitted the audio file from the coffee shop into evidence. The courtroom fell silent as Grant's voice filled the air. Tinny, but unmistakable. I had to almost hold her hand to get it done. No one believes a woman who just donated an organ would turn around and try to slash her husband's reputation. Grant stiffened in his chair. The color drained from his face as his own words stripped away his facade of concern. Diane didn't stop there. She slapped a file onto the judge's bench. "We have matched the date of the contested loan signature to the ICU logs," Diane stated. "On the day Evelyn Holloway supposedly signed for a loan of $120,000, she was under heavy sedation. We also have a forensic handwriting analysis confirming the signature is a tracing, not a genuine autograph. This is not paranoia, Your Honor. This is evidence." Grant's lawyer tried to pivot. "My client was managing family funds during a crisis. That money was in advance for potential medical complications." "Is that so?" Diane asked. She signaled to the forensic accountant we had hired. "Because according to the bank records, the loan proceeds did not go to the hospital. They were transferred to a holding company and then used to pay off the annual lease for a penthouse at the Arbors, a residence occupied by a Ms. Tessa Lane. The air left the room. Grant looked like he had been punched in the throat. He started whispering frantically to his lawyer, but the damage was done. The money trail didn't lie. He had stolen from his dying mother to pay for his mistress's apartment. This was for medical expenses, Grant blurted out, ignoring his lawyer's attempt to shush him. Insurance doesn't cover everything. We have the explanation of benefits right here, Diane countered calmly. Every single cent of Evelyn's care was covered by her comprehensive policy. There were no out-of-pocket costs. Then Nora stepped forward. She presented the letter Evelyn had written before the surgery. She read aloud the section where Evelyn listed the specific dates she had refused to sign papers Grant had shoved in her face. Grant's lawyer made one last, desperate attempt. The trust amendment is invalid. It relies on a clause triggered by divorce, which is coercive and against public policy. Mrs. Holloway was clearly influenced by outside parties when she drafted it. Nora produced a thumb drive. We anticipated this argument. Here is the video recording of the signing session, attended by 2 witnesses and a geriatric psychiatrist who attested to Evelyn's full mental competency. On the screen, Evelyn appeared frail, but her eyes were sharp. She looked into the camera and said, "Clear as a bell. I am doing this to protect my legacy from my son's greed." Grant snapped. The pressure was too much. He stood up, knocking his chair back with a loud clatter. "She planned this," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She thinks she owns me now. She thinks just because she gave a kidney. She thinks she is some sort of saint who can dictate my life. I needed that money to keep the business afloat because she wouldn't let go of the reins." The courtroom went dead silent. In his rage, he had just admitted that he needed the money and resented the donation. He had admitted the motive. The judge looked over his spectacles, his expression one of utter disdain. "Mr. Holloway, sit down before I have you removed. The temporary restraining order on the assets remains in effect. Furthermore, given the testimony regarding the signature, I am forwarding this file to the district attorney's office for an investigation into fraud and forgery." Grant slumped back into his chair, defeated. He looked at me. His eyes filled with hate, but for the first time, I saw the fear behind it. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply reached up and touched the spot on my abdomen where the scar lay hidden beneath my silk blouse. I had paid a high price in flesh and blood to learn the truth about the man I married. Now, he was about to pay the price in everything he owned. Desperation makes people sloppy, and Grant was no exception. In a last-ditch effort to save his crumbling narrative, he tried to remotely access my medical records. He wanted to find proof that I was mentally unstable prior to the surgery. Anything to validate his claims. But he forgot that I work in forensic compliance. I had set up a honeypot trap on my old email account. When he tried to bypass the 2-factor authentication from his hotel Wi-Fi, the system logged his IP address and flagged it as an unauthorized breach. He had just handed the district attorney proof of cyberstalking and attempted data theft. The final hearing was less of a trial and more of a dismantling. The courtroom was packed. Grant sat there, looking diminished, his expensive suit now hanging loosely on a frame that had lost its swagger. Diane Mercer didn't give him a moment to breathe. She called him to the stand and went straight for the throat. "Mr. Holloway," Diane said, leaning against the railing, "I want a simple yes or no answer. Did you knowingly serve divorce papers to your wife while she was under the influence of post-operative narcotics?" Grant shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to his lawyer for help that wasn't coming. I was just trying to be efficient. I had the papers prepared beforehand. I thought it would be easier." "Prepared beforehand," Diane repeated, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "So you planned to discard the woman saving your mother's life before the surgery even began?" Then the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A hush fell over the room as Evelyn walked in. She was leaning on a cane, but her head was high. The doctor had cleared her to testify. She took the stand, refusing to look at her son. "I did not add the donor protection clause to reward Mara," Evelyn said, her voice clear and cutting. "I added it because I knew my son. I knew he would sell this family for parts if I didn't stop him. He forced my hand on those loan documents when I was too weak to fight back. He saw me as a bank account, and he saw his wife as a spare part." Grant turned pale. The room felt suffocatingly small. Nora stood up for the final blow. She opened the trust binder and revealed the last addendum we had kept secret until this exact moment. "According to the final amendment of the Holloway Family Trust," Nora announced, "if the primary beneficiary is found to have committed financial fraud related to the grantor's health or assets, they are immediately disinherited. All control of the estate transfers to a medical charity trust, with a provision for full restitution to the organ donor for all pain and suffering. Mr. Holloway, you get 0. The judge didn't hesitate. He ruled the divorce in my favor on the grounds of extreme cruelty and fraud. He ordered the immediate liquidation of Grant's hidden assets to repay the stolen loan. He issued a permanent protective order preventing Grant from contacting me or Evelyn." As the gavel slammed down, 2 officers from the fraud division stepped forward. They weren't there for the divorce. They were there for the felony forgery and bank fraud charges. They pulled Grant's hands behind his back and clicked the handcuffs into place. Grant turned to look at me one last time. The arrogance was gone. The rage was gone. All that was left was the terrified look of a man realizing he had dug his own grave. I didn't smile. I didn't look away. I walked up to the railing, just close enough for him to hear me over the rustle of the crowd. "You used my kidney to buy yourself time," I said quietly. "You forgot that time is also used to reveal who people really are." I walked out of the courthouse into the bright, cold afternoon sun. The air hit my face, sharp and clean. I placed my hand over the scar on my abdomen. It didn't ache anymore. It was no longer a symbol of what I had lost to him. It was the mark of what I had survived. I had my name back. I had my dignity back. And for the first time in years, the story being written was entirely my own. Thank you so much for listening to my story on Mia Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below with your city or country so we can all connect. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people.